Everybody thinks this is a joke. They laughed when I said I'd run 450 miles. I'm not doing this to be famous. I'm doing it because my kids' hospital bills don't care how tired I am. If I stop, nothing changes, so I'm starting right now.
This shouldn't have worked, but it did. At 2:17 a.m., under a buzzing streetlight and a borrowed wreck overlay on a cracked phone screen, officials read out a number that sounded like a prank: 450 miles. The man who finished looked less like a champion than a worker who had wandered too far from his shift. Stay with me, because the turning point is not what you think. Before the record, Noah Carter was a package handler in the back of a logistics warehouse outside Phoenix, the kind of job where your name disappears under a scanner beep. He lived in a small rental duplex with a screen door that never latched and a mailbox that never quite closed. On his fridge, a final notice was held up by a magnet shaped like a cactus. Beside it, a single photo: his 6-year-old daughter, Lyla, missing one front tooth, smiling in a hospital gown like she was trying to comfort the adults around her, eyes too old for her small face. Lyla had been born with a heart defect that turned ordinary colds into emergencies. The doctors were excellent, but excellence didn't lower a deductible. Noah learned the language of invoices, estimated responsibility, pending approval, past due. He also learned a quieter language, the sound of his daughter's breathing at night, the way it tightened after she climbed stairs, the way she'd insist, "I'm fine," because she didn't want her dad to worry. Most mornings, Noah woke before sunrise to pack lunches and iron a tiny shirt that always wrinkled again the moment Lyla put it on. Then he drove her to school, drove himself to work, and spent 10 hours moving other people's packages while his phone stayed on, loud in case the clinic called. On the dashboard, he kept a folded hospital parking stub, like a talisman, proof that his life could change in one ring. The spark didn't arrive with fireworks. It arrived on a Tuesday afternoon in the children's cardiology waiting room, when Noah was sitting in a plastic chair, holding Lyla's little sneakers in his lap because she'd kicked them off while they waited. A local TV segment played on mute in the corner, captions rolling across the screen. An ultrarunner finishing a charity event, face crusted with salt, still smiling. The reporter used the phrase, "impossible distance," like it was a slogan. Lyla watched for a moment, then leaned close and whispered, "Do you think people can really do that?" Noah surprised himself by answering, "Yeah, I think they can." He didn't say, "I need to believe that." He didn't say, "I need to believe you'll have a future where your body isn't a question mark." He just felt a strange heat in his chest, as if the word impossible had been a door he'd never bothered to touch. That night, after Lyla fell asleep with a stuffed rabbit tucked under her chin, Noah searched endurance records on his phone. He scrolled until the numbers blurred and the distances stopped feeling like sport and started feeling like myth. Then he found it, an officially monitored multi-day run record, listed at a distance close enough to be imaginable and far enough to be absurd. 450 miles. He stared at the screen until it dimmed. Then he opened his notes app and typed one sentence. "They laughed when I said I'd run 450 miles. He wasn't quoting anyone yet. He was predicting them. Noah started the way regular people start, badly and in secret. He ran in the dark before his shift, around a cracked neighborhood park where sprinklers hissed and stray cats watched from under benches. His shoes were old and the soles were thinning. He tracked miles on a cheap watch that sometimes lost signal and turned his route into squiggles. After 8 miles, his lungs burned like he'd swallowed dust. After 10, his knees felt like they belonged to someone older. On week 2, he told Marcus from the warehouse, mostly because Marcus kept asking why Noah looked exhausted all the time. Marcus listened, then laughed, a short, bright sound that bounced off the metal shelves. 450, Marcus said. Bro, you can't even make it up the stairs to the break room without holding the rail. You're gonna run 450 miles? For what? TikTok? Noah smiled like it was a joke. Inside, something shrank. Then he went home and ran anyway, because the only thing worse than being laughed at was agreeing with the laughter. His first real attempt at an ultra didn't come with cameras. It came with a dusty starting line at a small trail event outside the city and a bib pinned to his shirt with safety pins. Noah had trained by adding mileage like stacking bricks. Thinking more was always better. He treated fatigue like a dare. He ran hard when he should have run easy. He skipped rest days when he felt guilty. At mile 30, his stomach turned. At 45, his quads felt like they were vibrating. At 58, his feet started to burn in a way that wasn't soreness. It was warning. By mile 65, blisters the size of quarters had formed under his toes. He tried to push through like a movie hero, but every step felt like stepping onto hot glass. He stopped at an aid station and sat down, just for a second, and when he looked up, the world tilted. A medic crouched in front of him, calm and practiced. "You're done," she said gently. "You're done for today." Failure number 1 tasted like salt and embarrassment. Noah rode back to the parking lot in a golf cart, wrapped in a foil blanket that crinkled with every breath. He stared at his shoes like they had betrayed him. Later, in his shower, he watched pink water spiral down the drain and wondered if he'd just tried to buy hope with pain. The doubt that followed wasn't loud at first. It was practical. Wearing sensible clothes. His mother called after Lyla's next appointment and said, "Honey, you need to be careful. You have responsibilities." Jenna, his ex, now his co-parent, said, "This is a distraction. You can't outrun reality." Noah wanted to argue, but he couldn't explain the feeling without sounding reckless, so he swallowed it and kept washing dishes. At work, the jokes became routine. "Hey, Forrest," Marcus would shout across the aisle. "You running to California today?" People laughed, and Noah laughed with them because laughing felt easier than admitting how much it stung. Then failure number 2 arrived in the quietest form, a month of disappearing. Noah woke up one morning and didn't run. He told himself he needed rest. The next day, he didn't run again. Exhaustion always had a convincing voice. And Noah's life was built on exhaustion. His training log became blank pages. The goal stayed in his notes app, but it felt like a dare from a version of himself he no longer recognized. One evening, after paying a stack of bills with hands that trembled from stress, Noah sat in his car outside the park. The sun was going down, turning the asphalt purple. His running shoes were on the passenger seat. He didn't put them on. He stared at the steering wheel and realized he was waiting for permission to quit. The thought slid in smooth and tempting. Nobody expects this from you. You can stop, and you'll still be a good dad. He went inside anyway, not because he felt inspired, but because he felt cornered by his own shrinking. He laced up, stepped onto the path, and ran 2 slow miles that felt harder than the 65 he'd failed at. Because these miles had no audience and no adrenaline, only truth. That night, he made a decision that sounded unromantic. If he was going to keep going, he needed a method, not a mood. The grind began. Noah built his mornings like a scaffold. Alarm at 4:10, coffee at 4:18, shoes at 4:26. Out the door before his brain could argue. He ran easy most days, so easy it embarrassed him at first, because he'd been taught that suffering was the only proof of effort. He added simple strength work in the living room while cartoons played for Lyla. Bodyweight squats, mobility, slow calf raises. He kept a notebook and wrote down small things. Where his feet rubbed, what made his stomach revolt, which socks worked, which routes felt safest, which mornings his mind lied loudest. He started logging time as carefully as distance. He learned that a long run didn't have to be heroic to be effective. It just had to be consistent and safe. He learned to break training into seasons because life didn't care about his calendar. Some weeks, a clinic visit replaced a workout. Some nights, a double shift stole his sleep. Instead of pretending he was invincible, he adjusted, then returned. He even learned to stop mid-run when something felt truly wrong, because quitting a run was sometimes the brave decision was to stop, sleep, and return. Slowly, the social pressure shifted. Jenna never became a cheerleader, but she stopped calling it a distraction. When Noah came home limping one night, she left an ice pack on the porch with a sticky note that just said, "Don't be stupid." It was the closest thing to support their history allowed. Lyla started asking him to draw little medals in her notebook, and once she taped one to his water bottle like it made the bottle official. Psychologically, Noah changed too. At first, he ran with fear of injury, fear of being laughed at, fear of failing in a way his daughter would someday hear about. Then he ran with stubbornness, each step a rebuttal. Then, after months, he ran with something steadier, calm focus. When the warehouse jokes came, he let them pass through him like wind through a cracked screen. He didn't need applause, he needed progress. Nearly a year into training, the worst day arrived. It started as a normal morning loop. The air was already warm, the kind of heat that makes your mouth dry before you're even thirsty. At mile 7, Noah felt a sharp sting along his shin. Clean, bright, not like soreness. He tried to shake it off. By mile 9, every step sent a jolt up his leg. His ears rang with his own breathing. His hands went cold. He limped home and sat on the kitchen floor, back against the cabinets, sweating without moving. Lyla padded in, still sleepy, and asked, "Daddy, are you okay?" Noah forced a smile that felt like it might split. At urgent care, the doctor didn't dramatize it. She pointed at the scan and said, "Stress reaction. If you keep running like this, you'll turn it into a fracture." Then she added the sentence Noah feared. "No running for a while." Failure number 3 didn't feel like pain. It felt like time leaving the room. He drove home with his jaw clenched so hard his teeth ached. That night, he lay on the couch and listened to the ceiling fan click like a countdown. His mouth stayed dry. His thoughts spiraled. "You're not built for this. You're wasting energy. You're gambling with stability." He pictured Lyla's hospital bracelet and felt guilt rise like nausea. Guilt for wanting something that looked selfish. Guilt for needing a win in a life that kept asking him to be smaller. For 3 days, he didn't tell anyone. He moved around the warehouse like a man trying not to be noticed. When Marcus joked, Noah didn't laugh. When Jenna asked why he seemed distant, he said, "Just tired." He was afraid that if he spoke the truth out loud, injury, delay, uncertainty, the whole dream would collapse like a cheap tent. The quiet support arrived in the smallest way, from the last person Noah expected. At Lyla's next clinic visit, a nurse named Renee noticed the boot on his leg. Late 40s, hair pulled back tight, eyes that missed nothing. While Lyla colored in the waiting room, Renee asked, "You run?" Noah almost said no. Instead, he nodded. He corrected. "Not now." Renee didn't give him a speech. She reached into her pocket, pulled out a folded index card, and slid it across the counter like it was confidential. On it were the names of a local physical therapist and a coach who specialized in rebuilding injured runners, people who worked with ordinary workers, not influencers. "My brother broke himself training angry," she said softly. "He thought pain meant progress. It doesn't. Call them. Don't do this alone." Then she walked away to do her job, leaving Noah with a card that weighed more than paper should. Noah made the call. He expected judgment. He got questions. The therapist watched how he walked, how his hips shifted, how his feet struck the ground. The coach listened to Noah's plan and then said something that stung. You've been trying to prove something every day. That's why you keep breaking. They rebuilt him slowly, weeks of rehab, strengthening, short, careful walk runs. Noah hated the slowness, but he hated the idea of quitting more. He learned that endurance wasn't just lungs and grit, it was mechanics, it was patience, it was respecting the line between tough and reckless. And when he finally ran again without pain, he didn't celebrate. He just wrote one word in his notebook: back. That's when the turning point clicked. One morning, months later, Noah was back on the park loop, running an easy mile that felt almost too gentle. His old self would have sped up to feel worthy. Instead, he stayed controlled and listened to his breathing, steady as a metronome. He realized he'd been imagining the 450-mile record as one monstrous act, one day where he would either become a legend or be exposed as a fool. But it wasn't one act, it was hundreds of decisions made correctly under pressure. In his notebook, on a page he'd almost forgotten, he had written, "Don't win the mile, finish the day." Now it finally made sense. The record wasn't a battle, it was execution. Noah announced his official attempt quietly. No glossy sponsors, no grand trailer. He arranged an approved, monitored route with oversight and safety support, checkpoints, assessments, crew, and rules designed to keep him from making stupid choices when fatigue made his brain unreliable. The goal wasn't danger. The goal was completion, clean, and legitimate. Jenna still didn't love it, but she stopped fighting him. She watched him tape a hot spot on his heel, pack a bag with plain seriousness, and said, "Just come back." It wasn't a blessing, it was a truce. His mother reacted with a long silence on the phone. Then she said, quietly, "I'm scared for you." Noah didn't argue. He said, "Me too." It was the first honest agreement they'd had in months, and somehow it loosened the tension between them. Marcus reacted with a smirk. "So you're really doing it," he said. "You're really gonna run 450 miles. Then, almost as an afterthought, he added, "Text me the start time. I want to see this circus." Noah didn't argue, he just nodded. He'd learned you don't negotiate with mockery, you just keep moving. The night before the start, Noah sat on the edge of his bed in a budget motel near the route. His gear was laid out like a ritual: shoes, spare socks, tape, simple layers, a printed checklist, his battered notebook. He opened his notes app and reread the sentence he'd typed at the beginning. "They laughed when I said I'd run 450 miles. He didn't feel angry anymore. He felt calm, almost tender toward the earlier version of himself who'd needed that line to survive. The start happened before dawn. The air was cool, the sky still dark enough to hide the distance. A small crew moved around him with quiet efficiency. The coach checked his posture and said, "Easy." Renee had shown up, not with a sign, but with a plain paper bag of supplies and a nod that said, "I'm here." Lyla hugged him hard, then stepped back and said, very seriously, "Run smart." Noah laughed, and for a second the tension loosened. Then he began. The first hours felt deceptively normal. His feet hit the ground in a steady rhythm. Streetlights clicked off one by one as the sun rose. The world smelled like dust and early coffee. Noah kept his pace controlled, almost irritatingly slow, exactly as planned. Every time ego tried to speed him up, he pictured Renee's brother training angry and breaking. He stayed calm. Day 1 turned into day 2. Fatigue thickened around him like fog. His shoulders tightened. His appetite became a chore. His thoughts narrowed. His body didn't just hurt, it complained. It argued. It manufactured reasons to stop. Noah didn't respond with emotion. He responded with routine. Brief resets, posture checks, short walks when needed, then back to steady movement. On the second night, darkness pressed close. A headlamp carved the road into a small private tunnel. Noah's feet felt swollen inside his shoes. The skin on his toes started to blister despite every precaution. He told himself not to catastrophize. Fix it early. At a checkpoint, he let the crew tape hotspots, changed socks with fingers that shook from fatigue, and moved again before stiffness could trap him. At 3:40 a.m., he hit a wall so clean it felt like someone flipped a switch. His legs were heavy, his mouth went dry, his ears rang. For a moment, he couldn't remember why he was doing this. The road looked endless, the record laughable. That's when Marcus showed up, hood up, coffee in hand, leaning beside the support vehicle like he'd accidentally wandered into the wrong movie. He didn't clap, he didn't cheer. He held out the coffee and said, "You look like trash." Noah let out a broken laugh and took a sip. Marcus shrugged. "Keep going. You're making me feel lazy." It was the closest thing to belief Marcus could manage, and it landed deeper than a compliment. By day 3, Noah's world became raw sensation. The sun was brutal, the ground shimmered, his thighs felt like wet sand. He started hearing phantom sounds, music that wasn't there, voices that melted into wind. His coach watched him carefully and made him sit for a brief check, because pride didn't matter more than safety. Noah hated stopping. He also knew the truth. Recklessness was how dreams died. After the check, he stood up slowly. His legs threatened to cramp. His hands tingled. He felt the urge to cry from sheer fatigue. Not sadness, just overflow. Then he saw Lyla on a video call, face close to the screen, eyes bright. "Daddy," she said, "you're still doing it." Noah swallowed. "Yeah," he whispered. "I'm still doing it." He ended the call and resumed, slower than ever, but still forward. The final stretch wasn't cinematic in the way movies lie. It was cinematic in the way reality gets quiet when something matters. The road narrowed, night returned. Noah's steps became smaller, more careful. Every mile marker was both a gift and an insult. Proof of progress, proof of how much remained. At mile 430, pain became background noise, like a refrigerator hum you forget until it stops. Noah's mind floated somewhere above his body, watching it work. He focused on tiny tasks, relax shoulders, unclench jaw, keep cadence, keep calm. When his vision blurred, he stared at the back of the support vehicle as if it were a lighthouse. Then a hot spot on his left foot tore open. It wasn't dramatic, no cinematic collapse, just a sudden sting and warmth that meant blood. For a few seconds, panic surged. The old impulse begged him to push through and pretend it didn't matter. But method mattered now. He stopped, sat, let the crew clean and retape, and stood up again slowly, jaw trembling. Not from pain alone, but from the fear that this tiny thing could end everything. When he started moving again, it felt like stepping back into himself. He remembered the first failed ultra, the foil blanket, the golf cart, the medic's calm face. He remembered sitting in his car outside the park, waiting for permission to quit. He remembered the doctor saying, "No running," like a verdict. He remembered Renee's index card sliding across the counter like a secret. All of it had been training, even the parts that didn't look like running. At 2:17 a.m., the finish line appeared as a strip of tape and a small crowd that looked unreal in the dark. Officials stood with clipboards, cameras were modest. The air smelled like cold asphalt and sweat. Noah's legs didn't suddenly feel fresh. His pain didn't vanish. He just kept the rhythm, step after step, until the tape was behind him and someone said, loud and clear, 450 miles. Noah stopped and swayed. Hands caught him. He didn't lift his arms. He bowed his head like he was listening for something. Then he exhaled, a long, shaking breath that felt like the first real breath in years. Renee nodded once, tears shining but contained. Marcus stared at Noah like he was trying to rewrite his own skepticism. Jenna covered her mouth, eyes wide, as if she'd just seen the future arrive early. Lyla, wrapped in a blanket, stepped forward and pressed her forehead to Noah's stomach, the way she used to when she needed comfort. Now she was giving it. The reward came in layers. First, verification, official confirmation that the record stood. Then headlines, local at first, then wider. A small sponsor offered support. A quiet fundraiser Noah had started just in case suddenly surged, and for once he watched numbers rise that didn't represent debt. His mother called, voice cracked, and said, "I'm sorry I tried to shrink you." Noah closed his eyes and said, "You were scared." And for the first time, her fear didn't feel like a chain. It felt like love trying, clumsily, to protect him. Monday morning afterward was different in a grounded way. Noah still woke early, but not because fear chased him out of bed. He paid a month of bills in one sitting and didn't have to choose which ones to delay. He took Lyla to the park and watched her run, not fast, not far, just free, and felt something unclench inside him. At the warehouse, the mood shifted. People who had laughed now spoke softer, like they didn't want to wake the part of Noah that had done the impossible. Marcus walked up, scratched his jaw, and said, awkwardly, "I was wrong." Then he added, "But don't get weird about it." Noah smiled. "I won't." Later, Noah brought the official certificate to the clinic and showed it to Renee like it belonged to her too. She glanced at it and said, "Good, now stay healthy." Then she went back to her patients, because that's what real support looks like. Quiet, consistent, not hungry for credit. And the line from that motel room clip, "They laughed when I said I'd run 450 miles, changed meaning. At the beginning it was a bruise, a prediction of ridicule. At the end, it was proof that laughter doesn't decide your limits. Method does. Patience does. The decision to return after failure does. So I'll ask you one question. What impossible goal have you kept private because you're afraid of being laughed at? And what would change if you took the first quiet step anyway?"